So we're going to talk about compresses next. What's the difference between compresses and poultices? So a poultice, as we saw, was where you actually have the physical herb wrapped in a cloth and applied to wherever it is that you need it. With a compress, what you're doing is you're making a tea, an infusion, a liquid extract of the herb. And rather than having the herb wrapped up in the cloth, you're just dipping a cloth into that liquid and into the tea, into the infusion, into the decoction. You're dipping it in warm and you're applying it. So it's great for things like an eye strain headache, for headaches. It's good for healing wounds. It's actually much easier to do a sterile compress than it is to do a sterile poultice because you've got so much plant material in the poultice. So if you're wanting to apply the plant extract to an open wound, it's much better to do a compress than it is to do a poultice. So how do you do a compress? So I have here some chamomile, some rose and some lavender, and we're going to make a compress out of these for a headache. It's a lovely mixture. So the lavender is really relaxing, it's great for headaches. The rose is very calming and very opening, and the chamomile again is very relaxing. It's a good muscle relaxant, so they're a good combination. Now, if you're somebody who has an allergy to the Asteraceae, you might want to leave the chamomile out of this, but that's a minority of people. So this is a good combination for most of us. So what we've done is to make a tea out of these three. This is a tea or an infusion. It's a water extract. So we've done lots of oil extracts earlier, and now we're doing a water extract. Water is an amazing solvent, and I love infusions. I do lots of teas, lots of decoctions, lots of water extracts. Water has the ability not only to extract the water-soluble constituents of the plant, but as it breaks down the water-soluble constituents of the plant, it starts to also be able to break down the more oil-soluble components of the plant. So it's quite a synergistic action that happens once water starts to work on plant material. So here is an infusion, a tisane, a tea. We've added hot water, boiling water, to these dried flowers. When you're making an infusion like this out of very aromatic plants, it's really important to always put the lid on. So I wouldn't want to, when I was making this compress, put these three herbs into the bowl and pour boiling water on it. Why not? Because what would happen is all of those lovely essential oils, the aromatic oils that are in these plants that are so much a part of their healing potency, will get lost. They'll just evaporate off, and then your compress will not be as good as it could be. So the other thing is that we are always going to want to strain it. You're not going to want to end up with lots of little bitty bits in your compress. So we've made it in a jar. As soon as we poured the boiling water on there, I put the lid on it to capture those essential oils. So when we take the lid off and we let it infuse for about 10 minutes, these are all quite soft. The leaves, flowers, those things are quite soft, and they infuse and extract within about 10 or 15 minutes. So this has been infusing for about 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes or so. So when I take the lid off, I'm going to be very careful not to lose any of the oils that have evaporated and condensed on the top here. So I'm going to take this off and pour any oils that might have been on there. You can see some of the condensation on the lid there. So I'm going to smell this. Oh, it smells so good. It smells of roses and lavender and chamomile, a really delicious mixture. So the next thing we're going to do is you can tell this has cooled down a bit now. It's to strain that. There we go. So we've strained off all of those flowers, And I'm going to just put the sieve over here. There we go. So now we've got a lovely bowl of infused flowers. So if I was wanting to do a compress with a root of some kind, if I was wanting to do a compress with, say, comfrey root, just as we made the poultice earlier with comfrey root, if I didn't want a poultice with it, if I wanted to compress with it, I would have gone through exactly the same process as I did for the poultice. I would have added a little bit more water and I would have decocted it. So whenever you're adding, whenever you're cooking the herb over heat, rather than just adding boiling water to it, when you're adding boiling water to it and putting the lid on it, that's an infusion. When you're putting it in a pan and you're simmering it, that's a decoction. And decoctions are what we use for roots and barks and berries, those harder parts of the plant that need simmering in order to extract them. The only exception to that would be if we were needing a root that is very aromatic. So for instance, elecampane root, which is a root that's really good for the lungs, you would never decoct that because it's incredibly aromatic, and you would, when you were simmering it, you'd lose all of those volatile oils. So in that case, you would do a long infusion with it. So you'd pour boiling water over it and you might leave it overnight. So that's how you deal with aromatic roots or aromatic berries. But generally, for non-aromatic roots, berries and barks, you decoct them in a pot and you simmer them. And then once they're simmered, you strain them off and you end up back here with your bowl of your herbs. So to do this compress, this is a compress for an eye strain headache. And what we're going to do is, we've got a cloth here that we're going to soak in the compress, in the herbal liquid. So there we go, nicely soaked. And then you squeeze that out. Now obviously, if this was really, really hot still, I would be very careful about doing that. But there we go. And then you can just put that over your head like that and use it as for a headache. You can use it over your eyes, which feels really good for an eye strain headache. You can wrap it around your temples. And you can also, apart from headaches and eye strain, you can use a compress like this for healing wounds. So using a much more sterile technique than that, I would make sure that the bowl was really clean, I would strain it off, and then I would open a sterile gauze, dip the sterile gauze into the infusion, and then apply that to, say, an ulcer, a hard to heal ulcer. That's a good use of a compress too. So you can leave this on. So say you're using this for an eye strain. You could redip this. Obviously, you're not going to redip anything if you're trying to use something that's sterile, but for just eyes or for relieving muscle aches or for relieving headaches, you can redip this in the warm liquid and you can reapply it. And it feels so good. It feels really, really relaxing, and it smells really good. It actually makes you just very sleepy. So I'm going to take it off before I go to sleep. So there we have it. That is how you make a compress. If you're wanting to make a compress and you're not wanting to go through the process of making a tea, the other way you can do it is to actually use a floral water. So you can use a hydrosol. And this is a rose hydrosol that I made, actually from roses, red roses from the garden. And you can see it's nice and clear. It's a distilled essence of the flowers, and it's a floral water, beautiful. But it smells beautifully of roses, and you can do it for lavender, you can do it for chamomile, you can do it for any of your aromatic herbs, and you can use that as a compress. Oh, it smells really lovely, very, very rosy. And what you can do is You can either warm it or you can use it as a cold compress. So you can use your floral water, you can add it to a bowl, and you can use a cold compress, which is also really helpful sometimes. So compresses, hot or cold, infusions, hydrosols, decoctions. There are lots of different ways of using that herbal water as a direct application for healing. So now we're going to do a quick review of poultices and compresses.